Welcome to the Tippie webinar series. I'm Lindsay Drilling, Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement at the Tippie College of Business. The Tippie webinar series is an initiative of the Alumni Engagement Department. Our goal is to bring the knowledge of our faculty and staff to you wherever you may be in the world. Today, we're thrilled to have Yiduo Shao, Assistant Professor of Management and Entrepreneurship at the Tippie College of Business, sharing her insights on age diversity in the workplace, speaking from experience, what an aging workforce adds to your team and how to embrace it. Before we start, we've got a lot to cover today, and we'll do our best to answer your questions at the end. Feel free to email Yiduo with any questions you have with any questions that we do not answer during the Q&A session. Also remember that all of our virtual presentations, including today's, will be on the college's YouTube page with closed captions a few days after the live webinar. Your thoughts are very important to us, so please stay until the end for a quick survey after the Q&A session. Your feedback helps us enhance our virtual programs. Now, I'd like to quickly introduce Yiduo Shao. Dr. Yiduo Shao is an assistant professor of management and entrepreneurship at the Henry B. Tippie College of Business. She has a PhD in management from the University of Florida and a Bachelor of Science in psychology from Peking University in China. With research interests spanning workforce aging, diversity and inclusion, and the dynamics of a virtual workplace, her scholarly contributions notably featured in leading management publications such as the Journal of Applied Psychology and Personnel Psychology. Let's now welcome our speaker, Yiduo Shao.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Lindsay. And I'm very happy to share some of the research insights related to the aging workforce and how organizations could better embrace the aging workforce in the near future. So at the beginning of my presentation, I wanted to highlight the global population aging trend as an important demographic change in the upcoming years. So what we see over here is a map of the world with different colors representing different proportions of population over 65 years old in 2015. So we can see that we have relatively more older population in European and North American countries, but for the most part on this map, it is showing a lighter green or yellow color, suggesting that overall the population was relatively younger in 2015. However, in about 25 years from now, the colors on this map will get a lot darker, suggesting that we're facing a much older world because of the rising life expectancy and declining birth rates. So to put this in a more numeric term, the world percentage for this share of population will grow from 8.5% in 2015 to the projected 16.7% by 2050. And this demographic change in the overall population also leads to a growth of the older workforce. And over the past 2 decades before the external shock of COVID, there had been an increase in older workers' labor force participation rate. And this means that the population over 55 years old, more and more people choose to participate in the labor force as opposed to retire or take on other responsibilities. And of course, COVID changed this trajectory a little bit, but right now this trend is resumed and we're expecting a steady increase in labor force participation rate in the future. So to illustrate in a more straightforward way, right now, 1 in 4 US workers are over 55 years old. And about 20% of the US population over 65 years old are currently working and employed. And 150 million jobs are projected to be shifted to workers over 55 years old in about 5 years. So this clearly shows that our older workforce is growing and is going to represent a substantial portion of the labor force in our future. Although the older workforce is growing, but we definitely face a lot of issues and problems that needs to be resolved before we are ready to embrace this aging workforce. The first issue is lack of attention. According to an AARP survey, only 4% of firms around the globe are committed to programs that intentionally support and integrate older workers into the multi-generational workforce. And there are some employers that assume that age does not matter, or age only represents weakness or outdated skills, but they do not appreciate the value of mature workers in the organizations. The second issue is discrimination and ageism. Although older workers are legally protected from being discriminated against, a lot of times we see the negative attitudes towards older workers or stereotypes and ageism prevailing in the workforce. And according to the WHO survey, 60% of the workers report experiencing ageism in various forms. So we definitely want to make sure we're not making wrong assumptions about age or older workers. So in this webinar, I hope to discuss a few aspects that may enhance our understanding of the older workers so that we can better support them and leverage the value of mature workers. First, I'll give you an overview of the age-related impacts in various aspects. And this should help us to understand what aging really means to us. And I will also discuss the aspects that are stereotypically assumed to be affected by age, but are actually not affected by age. And this helps demystify some age-related bias and stereotypes that may lead to workplace age discrimination. And second, when we consider adding an older workers to the team, we often face increased age diversity. And I'll discuss a little bit about the values and challenges associated with age diversity. And lastly, from a managerial and human resource perspective, I will talk a little bit about the practices that employers can consider implementing to leverage the value and mitigate the challenges of integrating older workers into the labor force. So now, the first part, I would like to discuss a little bit about the impact of age on work. In this session, we should have a better idea about what does aging really means to us. So before we move on to the detailed impacts of age, I would like to quickly clarify that by age, I'm focusing on chronological age, which refers to the amount of time that has elapsed from birth to a certain time point. So there are definitely other concepts related to age, such as subjective age, which is basically how old we think we are, and physical and cognitive age. Those are basically the ages of our physical or cognitive functioning. An underlying reason why there are so many different types or concepts associated with age is that individuals of the same chronological age can differ substantially. And so, for example, even people at the same age may perceive that they are at different age. So therefore, when we discuss age-related impacts, we should always keep this individual difference in mind. Otherwise, we assume everyone of the same age is the same, and then that's very much when we have a lot of age-related stereotypes and discriminations. So this also serves as a disclaimer here that what I talk about over here is a research finding about how aging may impact workers in general. So today we'll talk about 4 aspects of age-related changes that I think are more relevant to the workplace context. And of course, age's impacts are not limited to these 4 aspects or categories. But I hope that this gives you some overall general summary of things that we may pay more attention to when it comes to older workforce or older workers in organizations. So the first aspect I would like to talk about is motivation. And in terms of the age-related motivational changes, the social emotional selectivity theory, or SST, is a very famous lifespan development theory of motivation. It explains how aging changes what goals people pursue. And specifically, SST suggests that the subjective perception of time or future play an important role in explaining how age changes people's goals, preferences, and behaviors. So for younger individuals, they tend to perceive a longer future lying ahead of them. So in this case, they tend to prioritize knowledge acquisition. So for example, they may prioritize career advancement and development and seek to obtain more information and knowledge that could sharpen their skill and help them achieve those goals. Well, on the other hand, the older adults generally see a shorter future time horizon. So they tend to focus on social emotional goals that will allow them to obtain emotional fulfillment and establishing meaningful connections. So for example, older adults may prioritize to a greater extent the goal of spending quality time with coworkers who they really like. So based on these age-based differences, SST suggests a few workplace implications for supporting older workers or of different age and based on the goals and preferences that they have. So for older workers, managers can leverage the older workers' experiences by offering them roles of mentors and trainers for younger colleagues. And this not only acknowledges their experience, but also provides emotional fulfillment that older workers care about through mentorship. And in addition, based on the SST, older workers may value positive workplace relationships and a sense of community. So managers can create team building activities and encourage mentorship programs to foster the meaningful connections that older workers really enjoy at work. On the other hand, for younger workers, because of the different goals, younger workers typically focus on learning and career advancement. And so in this case, managers can offer training programs, development courses, and opportunities for skill enhancements to meet those goals. In addition, younger workers often value career progression. So managers should offer guidance on career path within the organization and beyond the organization and provide feedback on performance to help them grow. So overall, the SST suggests because of the motivational differences across the lifespan, the different practices or different training programs and different things could be done among the managers to leverage the value of both younger and older workers based on their different goals. And in addition to motivation and goal changes associated with age, one's cognition also change associated with age. And in terms of the age-related cognitive changes, there is an important distinction between fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence. We all have both types of intelligence, but they change in different ways as we grow older. So the fluid intelligence is likely the processor speed of a computer. So it's our ability to think quickly, solve new problems, process new information, and recognize patterns. So this type of intelligence is kind of like being a quick thinker in unfamiliar and complex situations. However, just like the latest software can slow down an older computer, our fluid intelligence tends to decline as we age. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, we have crystallized intelligence. And this is one more like the hard drive storage on your computer, the information that you have saved over the years. It's all about using the knowledge and skills that we have accumulated from experience, and this type of intelligence tend to steadily improve as we grow older. A lot of times, the crystallized intelligence is also referred to as wisdom in everyday language. So as you may imagine, the decline in fluid intelligence associated with age tend to be a lot more visible. You may recall a lot of scenarios when you cannot do math or take in new information and you blame it on your age. However, what is often overlooked is the increase in crystallized intelligence. And this is because a growth in wisdom is not always immediately visible to people. However, it is important to recognize the benefits of crystallized intelligence among older workers, especially in the organizational context. So this is because the older workers' crystallized intelligence is typically associated with accumulation of expertise and experience in specific areas. And this would allow them to troubleshoot problems effectively and offer specialized insights. For example, due to the increased crystallized intelligence, older workers may have a deeper understanding of the industry trends or best practices based on their experiences. And these insights are often what we call tacit knowledge. They are often like the iceberg hidden underneath the water. They're often invisible, but they can constitute a large chunk of important knowledge that matters in organizations. And of course, with the increased crystallized intelligence, older workers tend to know better who they may turn to for help with the specific questions, and they will also be able to mentor the less experienced colleagues and take on leadership roles. So it is important for us to be aware of the value of mature workers in terms of the accumulated crystallized intelligence associated with age, as opposed to only focusing on their decline in fluid intelligence. And a third aspect I hope to talk about is health. And I won't spend too much time on this because I believe in the medicine and public health disciplines, there are way more detailed pieces of evidence based on the general population about this topic. However, research within the workforce context indicates that age generally correlates with poor physical health indicators, such as blood pressure and BMI. And this trend is largely due to the common association between aging and a decline in cardiovascular health. But in the workplace context, the age-related decline in physical health can manifest for workers in various jobs, such as back pains and lifting heavy loads or working in front of computers for a longer time. And different from physical health, age is slightly positively or not related to mental health or emotional well-being. Part of this is because older workers or older people in general are more experienced and have become more emotionally stable after experiencing a lot of life events. That being said, I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't care about older workers' mental health. In particular, when it comes to retirement, it is very likely that older people may feel uncertain about their retirement adjustment or anxious about this transition because retirement is one of the major life changes because people end their career and start a new chapter of their life. So how are we able to alleviate the health-related challenges associated with age? And there are different ways that we may transform our workforce into a healthier environment to better support the need of older workers. So for example, incorporating ergonomic design into our workplace can sometimes prevent injuries and improve comfort among older workers. In addition, older workers may also enjoy the reduction in work intensity or load or enjoy more flexibility. So for example, in some hospital, older nurses above 45 years old are exempt from having night shifts. So lastly, the organization can also benefit from offering more mental health support. And beyond the organizational context and the organization's practices, I also wanted to share a bit about my recent research from a cross-national perspective. So what my co-authors and I did was that we compared the extent to which individuals experience more physical health issues as they grow older across 35 European countries. And we found across national differences or differences across different countries. We found that for countries with a larger health expenditure per capita, the age-related physical health decline was alleviated. And this clearly shows that efforts could be made not only at the organizational level, but also at a national level to better support the health of older adults and make them thrive in the workplace context and beyond. And in addition to motivation, cognition, and health that typically change associated with age, I also wanted to talk a little bit about the aspects that are not affected by age. The reason why we should know about the unaffected aspect is that a wrong assumption about age could lead to age discrimination. And this is because people typically hold beliefs about what a certain group of people are like. For example, some people may assume that females are easygoing, thus are not that suitable compared to males for leadership position. These inaccurate beliefs are stereotypes. And of course, people can have stereotypes about older workers as well, and that typically translate into their negative attitudes towards older workers, which is age prejudice. And then age stereotype and prejudice or negative emotions and attitudes towards older workers tend to lead to the behavioral unfair treatment of older workers in the workplace, that is age discrimination. And it's important to note that again, that age stereotypes can be inaccurate. That is the reason why we should learn about what aspects are assumed to be affected by age by most people, but are wrong, and in order to prevent age discrimination from occurring. And from a legal perspective, age discrimination is legally forbidden. The Age Discrimination in Employment Act, or ADEA, protects people who are over 40 years old from age discrimination. And this involves employment, harassment, and retaliation. So for example, most of the case, it is illegal for company to state that they're looking for younger workers who are aged 25 to 35 or recent graduates from college. And in addition, the ADEA also protects people from experiencing offensive remarks about a person's age, as well as experiencing retaliation against filing a charge of employment discrimination. Although there are a lot of protections from a legal perspective, but in reality, it could still be challenging to file charges against company for age discrimination claims. And this typically is because age discrimination often occurs in very subtle forms, such as microaggression, implicit bias, or exclusion from opportunities. And because they are so subtle, it is often very hard to pinpoint the direct evidence of discrimination. And relatedly, the subtle and vague nature of age discrimination at work most of the time cause burden of proof for the victim. And it is challenging to establish that adverse employment actions, such as firing, demotion, or lack of promotion, are due to age, but not other factors, such as performance, company restructuring, or changes in business need. And another reason why this could happen is that ageism can be deeply ingrained in the workforce. So the workplace culture may be already instilled with ageism, so the employers and employees may not view certain actions as discriminatory against older workers. And even the victim in this case may think that it is okay because that's how older workers are generally treated or should be treated, without realizing that it's not okay and the behaviors of age discrimination are uncalled for. So to address this issue, it is important to demystify the age-related biases and stereotypes that leads to age discrimination. And it's also important in that sense to prevent people from holding negative attitudes towards older employees based on the inaccurate and wrong beliefs about age-related impacts. And there's a very interesting and also very important research that empirically examined the age-related stereotypes of 6 kinds and tested whether they're true or not. So here, I would like to ask for your view in terms of which one or ones out of the 6 are true. Okay, what I'm seeing over here is that for the majority of the people, 72% of the participants rated that older workers are more resistant to change. And they are also rated less healthy in general as another stereotype that are more commonly held. And so, according to the empirical evidence, the only one that is true is that older workers are less willing to participate in training. So all the other aspects are wrong. And in particular for the healthy part, the reason why it wasn't that salient among older workers is that there are different aspects of health. So involving both the physical health and the mental health. And older workers also subjectively do not perceive that they experience poor health other than the poor physical health indicator. But in terms of the only true aspect of among the 6 age stereotypes is the participation in training. And this is reasonable given that we have talked about in terms of SST, because older workers pay less attention to training, and because that's not the social emotional goals that they would prioritize, and they would rather prioritize the goals that will allow them to derive more emotionally meaningful effects and more emotional significance and satisfaction. But for all the other aspects, they are not true. And it's important for us to refrain from making wrong assumptions about age or older workers and be aware that those wrong assumptions could potentially lead to age discrimination. So here I would like to offer a summary of what we have talked about so far. And across the different aspects, it is important to recognize again that there are individual differences in all of those changes. And our goal would be to better understand and better support older workers in the labor force, rather than discriminating them against those potential changes and challenges that they encounter. So now I would like to move forward to the second part of this seminar about the values and challenges of age diversity. So this is a graph that describes the workforce breakdown for different age groups projected by 2030. So we see that we have the workforce that ranges from 16 to over 80 years old. And this potentially means that we're having and will have a multi-generational workforce and an increasing age diversity in the labor force. So when we put older workers and younger workers together in a team, what may happen? And what are the things that we should be mindful about? And it's important to recognize that we haven't done enough in terms of age diversity. So according to a recent survey, only 8% of the organizations has explicitly included age as one of the metrics as part of their DEI strategy. And in addition, even among the organizations that do address the challenges or include age as part of their DEI strategy, the strategy has often been to simply encourage those of different generation to focus on the similarities or to deny the reality that age could have different aspects of changes. So based on the age-related changes, we would like to know when we have a team of different age or people coming from different age groups, are they going to bring us any benefits or challenges and how we can better deal with it? So first, I would like to share a little bit about the value of age diversity. And in the context of a diverse workplace, complementarity usually refers to the way in which different strengths and skills of various age groups can combine to enhance the team performance and output. So according to the complementarity perspective, an age-diverse team would enjoy a larger pool of different perspectives, experiences, skills, and social connections. And that ultimately would benefit the team outcome in terms of having a higher quality pool of information, better decision making, and more innovation would likely to happen in the context of complementarity. So in this case, it is important that we're grouping people of different age with different kind of strengths, such as the increase in fluid intelligence among older workers and the better crystallized intelligence among older workers together so that they can offer a complementarity perspective for better decision making in a team. While on the other hand, it is also important to recognize that age diversity could be associated with some challenges. And there are two reasons why we should be mindful about these challenges. And these two challenges may lead to the intergenerational conflict, which is basically meaning that people would have conflict against each other because of the different age or generations that they come from. And the first reason why we may have this challenge is similarity attraction. And this refers to the situation where when we have a diverse team, people would prefer to interact by default with people who are similar to them in terms of their demographic attributes, but also their values. And it is likely that the age-based differences, not only from the appearance or the objective age, but also from the goals that are different, that they prioritize differently, may lead to a negative effect of age diversity due to the similarity attraction. And another challenge associated with age diversity is a stereotype. And we talked about this, but a lot of time when we add a new person to the team and without a thorough understanding about what is true, what is not true about age-related impacts, the age stereotype could also alienate people of different ages and also cause the intergenerational conflict. So it's important to recognize these two challenges associated with age diversity and better support the age diverse workforce by implementing HR practices or managerial practices that could be beneficial. So how we can embrace the age diverse workforce? The first thing that we may want to pay attention to is to recognize and think positively about age-related differences. We need to keep the complementarity in mind and think about the ways that we could encourage a better expression of different viewpoints, ideas, perspective. And to that end, it is important for us to create a culture where people have psychological safety. So people feel safe psychologically to express differing ideas. And that is one of the important ways for us to leverage the value of the different viewpoints from age-diverse individuals. And another point that I wanted to make in terms of reducing or mitigating the challenges associated with age diversity is to avoid discrimination. And to that end, it is important for us to encourage employees to identify what age-based assumptions they have and reflect upon whether they're true or not. This may also involve the training provided to employees so that they can demystify their age-based stereotypes and biases as well. So these are the things that we could do to enhance or leverage the value of age diversity and also to mitigate the challenges. But in addition to those, I also wanted to talk a little bit about from a strategic or managerial perspective, what are the HR practices that we could implement to further leverage those value and to alleviate those challenges. And among the organizational behavior and human resource research, there are two different clusters of age-based HR practices that could be implemented in the organization. And one part of this is older worker specific HR practices. So as you may tell from its name, it's specifically offered to older workers. And this may involve both accommodation practices to better support the need of older workers and also development practices that would help them to reach the optimal functioning and develop their unique strength based on their career stage. And I'll talk in detail a little bit about what each cluster of practices could encompass. And in addition to the older worker specific HR practices, there's also age inclusive HR practices. And it is different from the older worker specific HR practices in that it is age neutral. So what it means is that age inclusive HR practices facilitate an inclusive treatment of employees of all age groups, regardless of their specific ages. So in this case, it's advocating for this integrative, inclusive treatment so that everyone feels equally and fairly treated, and their voices are heard. So in terms of the older worker-specific HR practices, these practices aim to create a work environment that accommodates and supports older workers' needs. And this is in consideration of the unique challenges and changes that come with aging. And for the most part, this is associated with the health-related challenges that people may face, such as providing ergonomic adjustments and implementing flexibility and flexible work arrangement, and etc. In other words, these are specifically provided to older workers to better support their health-related needs. And in addition, in particular, I wanted to mention that the retirement is one of the important things that we should think about and care about in terms of the older workers treatment. And so, for example, some organizations may offer phased or flexible retirement option. They may also offer some opportunity for older workers to continue participate, maybe part-time in the labor force after they retire. And this is what we typically call the bridge employment. So it is beneficial for older workers to know that there are different ways they can still, sustain a part of their participation in the workforce and continue to interact with the people that they care about, that they like in the organization. And that could also be one of the ways to facilitate the achievement and attainment of social emotional goals among older workers. And in addition to the accommodation practices, there's also the older worker specific development practices. And what this means is that these are the practices and initiatives and programs that are designed to enhance the skills, knowledge, and career growth of older employees. And although, as I have said and indicated early on, the older workers tend to prioritize more social emotional goals than career advancement, but it's important to recognize that they have the unique value of increased crystallized intelligence. So we should definitely think about how we can continue to leverage the value of the mature workers if they are willing to contribute further to the workforce. And a lot of times, what we see in the organization is that it's not that older workers do not want to contribute. It is oftentimes their voices are not heard or their strengths and skills are considered outdated or not appreciated. So the development practices would focus on how we can offer the opportunity for older workers to pass their important knowledge to the younger generation in the workforce. And this may involve some mentorship opportunity, cross-training, and job rotation so that older workers may feel competent enough and nice enough to work on things they really enjoy. This may also involve leadership development and continuous learning opportunity if older workers are willing to participate. So in addition to the older worker specific HR practices, we can also implement age-inclusive HR practices. And this is quite similar, I would say, to the general inclusive practices that we implement for all the different demographic attributes or different kind of characteristics of individual. But we need to keep in mind that age is a salient attribute that we should take into account in implementing these age-inclusive practices. And so age-inclusive HR practices encourage and facilitate an environment where employees of all ages are valued, respected, and given equal opportunities to succeed. So this may involve creating an environment where people are assured that all employees, regardless of their background and identity, are treated fairly without discrimination in terms of their age. And this may involve providing employees with equal opportunity for advancement, training, and development without favoritism or biases. And one particular aspect of this is that older workers are typically assumed and typically experience challenges in terms of using new technologies. So it is likely that they may not feel quite comfortable yet to participate in the online training or Zoom meeting and etc. And they feel potentially embarrassed to seek for help. So from an organization's perspective, other than the digitalization of the workplace, we should keep in mind that older employees may potentially experience these challenges. And we may implement some hybrid events to allow for older workers to still participate in a lot of organizational events through in-person meetings or activities. And this may also be one of the aspects reflecting the equal opportunity and treatment towards the older workers. And the second part of the inclusive climate involves the integration of differences. And this means that we need to recognize the unique skills, experiences, and backgrounds that each employee brings to the workplace and value them as assets. And lastly, we need to have inclusion in decision making. This means that we need to give employees a voice in decisions that affect their work in a broader organization, regardless of their age. We need to encourage teamwork and cross-functional collaboration and allow employees of different age to contribute their unique perspective to problem solving and innovation. And this is particularly important given the increase in crystallized intelligence. As I have indicated earlier, a lot of times the increase in crystallized intelligence and wisdom among older workers are quite overlooked. So the inclusion in decision making needs to ensure that even people with older ages and they may think that their skills or insights are outdated, still be able to contribute to the teamwork and collaboration. So now, as I'm approaching the end of my seminar, I wanted to offer a few key takeaways from today's seminar. So first, we need to keep the age-related impacts in mind. And this involves various aspects featuring both gains and losses. And we need to support the age-related needs in terms of those potentially decline and challenges that people may face as they grow older. We also need to keep in mind how we can leverage the age-unique talent among older workers. We also need to be aware of the potential age stereotypes and discrimination or biases that prevail in the workplace. And we know that a lot of times they are based on the wrong and erroneous beliefs and stereotypes and assumptions about age-related impacts. So sometimes it is important to implement training or small conference sessions to demystify those biases. And lastly, we need to create an age-inclusive and supportive and friendly environment, and a lot of HR practices could be implemented to that purpose. All right, with that, that concludes my webinar, and thank you very much for listening. I will be happy to take any questions.
Okay, so Dustin has asked, what is the average age of the workforce in 2030? Looking at the graph around age 45, is this increasing compared to historical data?
Yeah, so definitely we are looking at an increasing average age. I don't have the exact number of the average age in mind right away, but because of the declining birth rate, we have a smaller portion of younger workers entering the workforce. While on the other hand, because of the longer life expectancy, more and more older workers feel that they are capable and they're willing to contribute further at the later career stage. So they stay in the labor force longer. So those two different kind of factors contribute to the increasing average age looking into the future.
The next question is from an anonymous attendee. It is, how do you know if it is an age discrimination issue rather than personality issues?
So a lot of times the personality issues may not manifest as targeted as age. For example, of course, we acknowledge that there are some different age-based changes. But for example, age does not stereotypically change people's personality traits. The only personality traits that changes with age, with evidence, is emotional stability or neuroticism. As people grow older, they tend to become more emotional stable. But when it comes to age discrimination, it may be the fact that this is based on the wrongful assumption that we have. And people think that, oh, older workers are typically this way, or they should be this way. They should experience weakness or they represent outdated skills. So I'm going to act in a way that is unfairly treating them towards their age or because of their age, and that is age discrimination. I hope that clarifies the distinction between the personality change that happens or naturally occurs with age from the discrimination that is uncalled for and is illegal and should not be happening in an organization.
Okay, another question that we just got is, what happens when organizational change is needed and the long timers just need to go?
Sorry, could you repeat that question again?
Yeah. What happens when organizational change is needed and the long timers just need to go?
So a lot of times, I think it's a matter of not only considering the age, but also considering a lot of performing issues and etc. So of course, we know that older workers, they sometimes may feel that they are already, say, tenured and they feel secure enough, they do not feel ready to contribute further to the organization. And I would say that may be a performance issue. but we shouldn't assume that people would have a performance issue just because of their age. So for example, if the organization is undergoing changes and there is a systematic way of evaluating people's performance, then I would say we should dismiss or maybe like let people go when they have performing issues, not to let them go because they are older or they have stayed long enough. So again, that ties back to the age discrimination, which is targeted at age, but is not associated with any other performing issue or any other things that we also care about the productivity or well-being in organization.
Another question that we've gotten is, older workers may be paid more and more expensive in terms of SG&A. This can also add to layoff factors. Do you find this in your research?
Not typically in my research, but I would definitely say that a lot of times the package, the salary is associated with seniority. And I would also say that this may put them in a more relatively disadvantageous place. But again, I think that from an employer's perspective, we should not only consider the dollar sign, right? So I think a lot of times the discharge or the dismissal of the older workers are potentially driven by the employer's kind of financial consideration because they cost more. So I'm just going to let them go. But on the other hand, as I said earlier about the crystallized intelligence, a lot of times we do not recognize that older workers may have those tacit knowledge in the organization that lead them to contribute further to the organization's performance. And these are tend to be overlooked. So I would say a lot of times they do, like on the surface, cost more, and that may drive a lot of decision. But I would add another layer to it and exercise caution before only using that financial factor in letting people go. I would consider what are the things that we could do for older workers, and also are there unique values or talents that we can tap onto before letting them go.
Okay, another question we've gotten is, how would you suggest working with a supervisor who might hold some assumptions on age? What strategies would you suggest to help or mitigate this?
So there are some recent research about like identifying the assumption, and this may sometimes come from the more organization top-down perspective in terms of organizing training programs or conference sessions to demystify those age-related biases. So from a top-down perspective, I would say training and more information sessions about those age-related stereotypes is definitely important. And it's important to help the managers to realize I shouldn't make those assumptions based on age. But on the other hand, I also recognize that a lot of times as employees or as subordinates to those managers who have or hold those age-related bias wouldn't be able to just teach them a lesson. So in this case, I would also make sure that we are creating a supportive culture among the colleagues, and to make sure that when we are discriminated against, we communicate that to the manager and say, hey, I feel that I'm not equally or fairly treated by you. And you may signal this in a more explicit or implicit way. But in terms of the experience of age discrimination from an employee perspective, it is definitely uncalled for. And I would, if I were that person, I would have that conversation with the manager and to try to reduce the chance that I am further negatively impacted by that age biases. Because if there are smaller signs up front about like this person may be discriminated against based on age, it is more likely that this smaller transgression may also transform into something that, makes a bigger deal. So I would have that conversation potentially to stop that at an earlier stage, as opposed to waiting until like bigger things to happen.
Okay, we have time for one final question, and it is, would AI have a future role in capturing the wisdom and institutional knowledge that older workers have?
So a lot of times the AI would have more what we say declarative knowledge, if you will. So the declarative knowledge are the objective facts. So for example, I know how to use Zoom, or I know how to, like navigate how to share my screen over Zoom. But what I'm talking about in terms of older workers in crystallized intelligence and the tacit knowledge that they hold, it may be more about the higher order skill development, such as I know how to organize the content for webinar, or I know how to answer a question, and etc. So those are the things that would not be typically declarative or visible to others and easily transmitted to others. I would say those knowledge are very valuable to the organization. It's like that iceberg that like a big chunk of knowledge is hidden underneath the water. And those are the knowledge that are typically valued and valuably held among older workers. So in terms of just my personal prediction, I would say that the AI would take over more of the jobs that require explicit, visible, easy knowledge based on facts, but they are less likely to take over the knowledge or wisdom held by older workers because those are more tactics.
Thank you, Yiduo, and thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. Your feedback is valuable, so please take a moment to complete the survey at the end. On behalf of the Tippie College of Business, thank you for joining us this afternoon, and as always, go Hawks!